All right, everybody, we're going to allow a couple seconds while people sign in and get ready for this webinar. This is a big subject that we're going to try to tackle in 40 minutes. So things are going to go fast, ask questions, and enjoy your time here. Sit back, relax, grab a cocktail. This is for you guys. It's to have fun and to keep us engaged in sailing while we're going through this lockdown situation. So tonight we have a little bit of a technical masterpiece going on here because we're trying to broadcast on two different formats at exactly the same time. And when you have questions, type them in the text box regardless of what format you're on and address everyone, because I have Etta here that's going to field questions for me, and that way I can kind of stay focused on the webinar. And later in the week, maybe we'll post a photo of our little makeshift studio here. We've got 5 monitors going right now to handle all this. And so just relax, have a good time, and we'll get started here. I guess we'll get started here right now. Okay, so a little bit about me. Hold on one sec. A little bit about me. I'm Chuck Skewes. I own 3 Ullman sales lofts on the west coast of North America, from Puerto Vallarta, San Diego, and the Pacific Northwest. And I sail more miles a year than I drive my car. I've been in the fortunate situation of having good success inshore and offshore racing, and I do miles and miles of cruising. I help support Baja, and we do sail repair for those guys and little lessons on the way down. And it's been very rewarding, and I'm a very fortunate situation. So we're going to get on with the sail trim now. Let me advance these slides here. I've got one. Okay, so sail shape. Now, we're going to talk at first about how sail shape is developed in the sails, and it'll give you a little better idea of why when you do certain things, you get the results you do. So one of the first things that we do is we're going to talk about how we define the sail shape. Now, this is what we call the chord length. This is looking down on a sail, and if you just took an aerial view and then cut a sail in half, this is the chord length. The next is going to be what we call the draft. That's how deep a sail is from a straight line from left to leech to the deepest point of the sail. And then we're going to talk about the position of max draft, which is one of the more key components in sail shape. And then we're going to talk about entry angle, exit angle, and then we're going to talk about twist. Now, in a simple way, you're going to deal with, your sailmaker is going to deal with some of these things for you, but the adjustments on your boat, depending on how bendy your mast is and how much your controls move around, those are going to have a big effect on sail shape, and they go into, you probably can hear some of the wind in the background. We have probably the windiest day we've ever had in San Diego today, and so as the breeze changes, you guys are going to be able to change the sail shape to be more efficient and or better boat control. Okay, so the way we create sail shape is we start it with broad seam and then we do luff curve. Broad seam is what we call internal shaping in the sail, and then luff curve is what we call external shaping of the sail. So broad seam starts with, like, the bottom of your sail will have a curved section that meets a flat section, and it's built kind of like a beach ball. So we have shape in each of these seams, and as we stick them together, it makes like the airplane wing shape. Now that controls, in basic form, how or where that shape's going to go when you start inducing stuff from your luff curve and your luff hollows. So luff curve is when you take the mainsail. I'm going to talk about mainsails right now. They work the same as Genoa's, but I'll explain the difference in a bit. There's a curve on the front of your mainsail, and your mast pushes that curve into the sail, which pushes more cloth into the sail. It's a simple factor of just doing this. And the control of that is done by the broad seaming. So that's how we keep it from ending up all at the leech or all the way at the luff. We try to have it at that magical percentage point fast depending on your boat. So now you know when you bend the mast and it matches a luff curve, it's making the sail flatter. It's pretty simple situation. So the trim for different sail conditions has a lot to do with the wind, the sea state, the changing of the wind strengths. We talked about that a little bit. So everything's going to be a little more full, generally in lighter air, and a little flatter in heavier air. You change with the sea states as well because you're going to need more power in a lot of chop or big ocean swell. And upwind and downwind obviously have different sail shapes. So you look at it on a graph. If you're off to the left side of this graph, you're talking about a more full sail shape. It's a sail shape designed to develop power to get you constantly accelerating. And the way I talk about it is if I can hit hull speed, I start flattening sails. And if I can't hit hull speed, we make sails a little bit more full. Because if you're not hitting hull speed, you're constantly in the acceleration mode. So you want to spend your effort in the sails to be accelerating because waves are stopping you, or you're sailing between puffs, so you're not staying at a full speed. You're slowing down. You're having to reaccelerate. You need to keep full sails for that. Now, in breeze like we have here in San Diego today, or you get a lot of times in the Bay Area or in Seattle in the winter, and the water's smooth, you can have a flat sail shape, and you end up pointing quite high, and you'll keep the speed up because there's nothing in the environment that's stopping the boat from going at full speed. So those are the kind of cues you want to have as far as when you go full or when you start going flatter. So now mainsail trim. We're going to talk about the trim controls. First, you're going to have halyard and Cunningham. Now, they do exactly the same thing. The issue is that if you're going upwind and you have the main sheet on and you try to raise the main halyard, all it does is pull the leech tighter. It's not going to pull the luff because you're holding the boom down with the main sheet and or bang. So the Cunningham was designed by, ironically enough, these people named this guy named Cunningham, and he put a little ring in his, I believe it was a Flying Dutchman, pulled down on the luff because main sheet's pulling down on the boom, and he could get the luff tight and move the draft slightly forward, and that in turn, the halyard does the same thing as the Cunningham. You can do it with the halyard. You just have to do an attack or release the main sheet and then pull it back on. So now you have the outhaul. The outhaul controls the bottom third of the sail, basically from just above your bottom batten in most boats down to the foot. And that develops the fullness. Like when you're in lighter air, you want to point a little bit more. You might ease the outhaul off. It'll round the bottom of the mainsail, and that'll get you a little extra oomph to get upwind. But once you're at hull speed, you're going to start flattening that out as the breeze increases and as you go forward. So main sheet and boom bang. There's a big confusion here because if you're in a dinghy with a little spindly mast, the vang bends the mast because it pushes the boom forward and it pushes it into the mast, and that bends the mast. If you're on a big boat with a big mast, the vang, all it does is exactly the same thing the main sheet does. It pulls the boom down. So if you're in a lot of wind and you're overpowered and you need to twist, you need to ease the vang. The vang doesn't need to be on equal with the main sheet if you're not out of traveler. So I think of the vang as a continuation of the traveler. So now you get hit by a puff and you drop the traveler down to keep the boat on its feet, and you run out of traveler, and now you're starting to still get overpowered. You pull the vang on as hard as you can, and then when you ease the main sheet, the boom does not lift. The boom just continues to go out. So it's just an extension of the traveler. So the boom vang is often misused for that purposes. And now you have backstay. We talked about how the front of the main was being pushed back by the mast. As you crank backstay on, it bends the mast on a lot of boats, most boats, and it sucks some of the fullness out of the mainsail. Now, when this happens, it often moves the draft slightly aft in the sail, so that's when you add halyard or Cunningham to counteract it. So most of these controls I'm talking about work in conjunction with each other. And another thing that happens is every time you put backstay on, since you're bending the mast, you're actually bringing the head of the main down towards the gooseneck because you're making the mast shorter because a curved line is longer. It has to be longer than a straight line. So once you do that, you're shortening that. You have to bring main sheet in at the same time. If you just keep your main sheet locked on and then put backstay on, you're going to be main sheet's generally going to be too loose. So this just shows you the controls are there. So now here's the trim controls. Those were the rig controls. Here's the trim controls. We're talking about halyard and Cunningham and outhaul and boom, main sheet and boom bang on how it controls everything. Backstay, and there we go. Now, this picture is really important to look at here. We'll get the second monitor caught up. I got ahead of it here. Most boats, cruising, racing, high performance, you want the boom pretty close to center line. Now, to do this in light air, you have to have the traveler way above center line. And as the breeze increases, you drop the traveler down and bring more main sheet on, the boom stays on center line. So when the boom starts going to leeward is when the boat starts heeling too much for performance reasons. You generally want, you'll see some of the new modern boats, they carry the boom quite a ways above center line. That's not good on most boats, but there are some boats that actually handle that okay. So the traveler is doing the boom to weather or to leeward. And so now the golden rule of main sail trim is place the boom on center line and make the top batten parallel with it. So I have some photos here that I'll show you. This is a perfect example of a main sheet too tight. See how that angle is hooked to weather of that top batten? That's a big sign. If you didn't have any telltales on there, and I'll explain how the telltales will help you in a bit. If you didn't have any telltales on it, you just side up. They have to be parallel. Obviously, the batten is going to be slightly to leeward of the boom, but it needs to be parallel. And then the next slide we have is this is too much twist. This is too loose for most conditions, unless it was really, really windy. How the batten is now falling off from the angle to the boom. And the next slide, this is correct. This is parallel to the boom, and this is where your speed's going. Now, when you're looking at the telltale on the main, off the batten, the leech telltales, the top one will generally fly all the time if your main is too loose, and it will stall all the time if your main is too tight, meaning it's going to hide behind the main. The best, once you're up to boat speed, the best trim is generally stalling between 25 and 50% of the time. So it'll fly, and it'll hide behind the main, and then it'll come out and fly. And if your main trimmer works hard at keeping that going at that same pace and make sure that the boat speed doesn't drop, communicates with the driver, you're going to have much better upwind performance. So now let's go into, this is just a little brief about what we talked about. Let's go to the next slide, and we're going to talk about Genoa trim. We have a question?
There was a question, Chuck. So actually back to the hull speed slide that you had.
Yes.
So Andy was asking, are you taking hull speed? Is that 1.34 times square root of the waterline?
Yeah, actually, I think that's true, but what you'll find is a lot of boats can exceed hull speed. So what I mean by hull speed is when you go out sailing, the highest speed you see. And if you haven't calibrated your knot meter, it might be, on a boat that does 7 knots, it might be 6.8 or it might be 7.4. So find out when you're going on a pretty good pace, going upwind, the way I like to find out my maximum speed is I don't have the sails all the way in, maybe 3-4 inches off the spreaders, 3-4 inches off the foot of the shrouds, and then the main on center line with just maybe a slight bit of twist, and then I sail till those telltales are flying perfectly even. And when you do that, you'll see that what that knot meter reads. Now that's going to be your maximum upwind speed because you're going upwind, and that's in an ideal situation. Now you want to slowly start coming up and seeing how little that drops per degree that you come up. If you can come up 4 degrees and you only drop a tenth, that's a gain. If you can come up 5 degrees and you lose half a knot, that's now you're at a wash. You're probably a little too slow at half a knot at gaining that amount of point. So anything more than that, you drop a whole knot or 3/4 of a knot, you're too high and you're not hitting your holster. So that's sort of a simple way to do it. And unless you really calibrate your instruments, you're not going to be able to use the square root of the water line. So, okay, so Genoa trim. It's very similar to the same as the main, and I know that this is a jib and not a Genoa, but I have better photos for this. So one of the first things we're going to talk about is a halyard and Cunningham. Some boats you see 24s will have Cunninghams on the jibs for the same reason we just talked about. The biggest difference is you can adjust the jib halyard much easier than you can the main halyard, because when you tack, the jib comes completely loose, and the main sheet doesn't usually come that much looser in a tack. So you can adjust the halyard in the middle of a tack, and you'll often see that in a race boats where guys have people set up with the handle in the winch in a self-tailer, and as soon as that thing's released, they grind it up the amount, and then they off on the other tack. So halyard and Cunningham do exactly the same thing between the main and the head sail. Now backstay does the same thing as well. There's a hollow cut in the front of your jib because it's not going against a mast, it's going against a flexible wire. And so rather than it being a mast that's bent pushing against it, it's a wire, and the more that wire flexes, it pushes into the sail or allows the front of that sail to come back and make the sail more full. So when you crank the backstay on, it not only flattens the main, it pulls harder against the forestay and flattens that sail. And on some boats, especially fractional rig boats, the more you put the main sheet on, it pulls the forestay on as well, and it'll flatten the head stay. And then you get into the more Grand Prix boats that have running backstays. You can control that infinitely. You got great control of the forestay with the running backstay. So you can have great mainsail trim and then maybe have the Genoa flat when you need it flat. So sheet lead position and sheet tension. Now I talk about this a lot to people about how to find the best lead position. The simple answer is you go to a point in the exact middle of the jib luff on your head sail. You can do it by just taking the sail down, measuring it out, going to the halfway point, making a little black mark on your luff tape, and a line from that through the clew. If that line extended, where it hits the deck or where it hits your jib track is the starting point for your jib lead. It's on jibs, it's maybe at 55%, but on Genoas it's about 50%. And so that's a good starting point for where your head stay, where your jib lead start the whole situation. So now I like to use, most boats have trouble having spreaders short enough to point as high as they really want to point. That's why a lot of the modern boats have non-overlapping head sails. They can come in much tighter and point higher. If they had Genoas, they'd be out at the spreaders. So a really nice rule of thumb is I use about a foot up from the foot of the jib, the distance between your shrouds and the sail is the same distance you have off the spreader up on the rig. So if you're just touching the shrouds down low, just about a foot up from the foot of the Genoa, I don't mean the curl like where you had the foot line on, but just up from there. If it was just touching there, you'd just be touching your spreaders. And if you're 3 inches off the spreaders, you're 3 inches off on the foot. You'd have a hard time being better at having where that perfectly trim is than that on most boats. So we have another question here.
While we're on the slide, yeah. So, Wardy Payne, can you say that one more time? about starting point of the jib car.
Okay, so starting point of the jib car. People often ask it again because I think I have a little difficulty explaining it. If you took a string from the middle of the luff of your Genoa, and while you were flying your Genoa, you ran it past your clue, pulled it tight, wherever it hits the track is your starting sheeting point. It's the middle range of your sheeting point. So just think of that. So you can, what we used to do on thistles, for instance, is we used to take a little piece of, we used to draw a little line or put a little piece of draft stripe tape that was on the clue in that angle. So then you could just side up the jib sheet to that line and see if it was at a plane or at a crooked angle. So that's a great question there. Okay, so now next on here is we're going to talk about the four-stage engine. This is a perfect example of what I was talking about. On the left of the slide here, you see a slack forestay, which if you use that extrusion at about 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches, that's about a 7 or 8 inch sag in the forestay. And then the one all the way on the right, when we're in heavy air, it's about a 3-inch sag in the forestay. So that's the type of adjustments that you want to use. And we can go into exactly how to calibrate that and stuff, but that can be a whole new webinar because I've come up with some ways that we've simplified on some of these boats to line up something in the cockpit through the spreader or where your forestay needs to be to duplicate that setting. But this would take too long tonight to do that. We have another question here.
Actually, there's a technical difficulty, and I'm not sure why, but on Zoom we have lost the presentation, so that's going to get tricky now.
We will, and there's multiple people that are having this problem.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to pause this and then hit share again. See if that comes back. Some of you guys that are on free conference call have the presentation. The ones that are on Zoom have lost it. So.
I'm seeing it still. Okay, now we might have an issue. I don't know why we would have lost it.
All right, so that didn't change anything. Okay. We'll try to keep this going and just explain it on the way. I'm not sure what's going on Zoom right now. Okay, so we're just going to talk about driving to the telltales, and this will be a fairly simple thing to visualize why Etta works on our technical things. So driving to the telltales, the rule I use is I always want both telltales to fly perfectly flowing back, but we all know that we're not perfect at driving. So if you're going to err, if nobody's hiking on the rail, there's not enough wind for people hiking on the rail, I err for the outside one to be flickering, never the inside one. You're always continually trying to accelerate. And those are those conditions I was talking about where your boat is not up to speed. You've got to be pressing. Boat speed is the key to performance. It's more important than point. It's more important than, most of the time, it's more important than going the right way. Keeping the boat going fast all the time is really, really important. So laying into that head sail so that that outside telltale is just ticking a bit. I don't mean just laying out and really spinning, but as close to flying them perfect, but never letting the inside one tick and only letting the outside one tick occasionally is a good way to go. Now, when the breeze is up and you have people on the rail, you go the other way. You start having the inside one tick. And for you guys that can see the slide, there's a demonstration of why the telltales do what they do. And when you're in a lot of wind, you're just worried about boat speed. You're sailing as high as you can and keeping the boat speed going. So we're still working on a couple technical difficulties here. Let's see if we can. All right, so see, I don't know what's going on. Zoom, for some reason, has lost a connection.
I'm sorry. Try to stop share.
Okay, on spinnaker trim. And now we did a whole presentation on spinnaker trim about the first one of the 4 that we've done, and we're going to do it again this Thursday. So this is going to be fairly brief, and we will get into a big discussion on this Thursday, so because you can go on forever on spinnaker trim.
Okay, hold on.
But basically,
now we're having issues on the other one as well.
With the screen sharing?
Conference call. So let's
Have we
do
lost?
this one more time here.
all right. Let me get back to sharing the screen, and we will be good to go. All right.
Wow. I think we're good.
We're good. Wow, that was big. All right. So we'll get the slides caught up with each other here, and get into. Oops, I'm going the wrong way. You take care of this. I can't focus on that. Okay. So spinnaker trim. Now, if you look at this slide, wait till Zoom is caught up here. You can see the difference between these 2 boats that are right next to each other. And this is a one design regatta, so that you can see that the boat is closest to us with the red spinnaker. The leech is unfair. The pole is away from the clew of the spinnaker, and you look at the angle of the head, the way it's flying away from the mast and coming down, they're losing projected area. The spinnaker pole is flying too. The spinnaker's flying too high. They're not pulling it down enough. The guy next to them, who's got the pole touching the spinnaker, he's got a much fairer leech, and he's got more projected area, and it's a better overall trim situation. Now here's a head-on shot of a very similar situation. The lighter red spinnaker in front, the guy's not touching the pole with the spinnaker clew, and he's got what we call up at the top of that, we actually call that elephant ass. What happens is the higher you fly your spinnaker, the looser your leeches are, the more open they are, the flatter the spinnaker, and both sides kind of start projecting in, and it causes them to make this little crease in the middle that comes back, and it's an unfair shape, and the spinnaker is very unstable. Now the dark red spinnaker in the background, now he's got his spinnaker projected right. It's not choked down, but it's pulled down just ever so slightly more than the loose clew of the spinnaker. But one of the things that I want to show you on these next couple slides, or 2 behind here, is the pole versus the boom. They don't go in the same plane, and we talk about this in length at the spinnaker trim that we're going to do on Thursday. They don't go in the same plane. The main is always out more than the pole is back. So this is a correct angle for the spinnaker pole versus the main, and I'm going to show you why. The tack and the clew of the spinnaker need to be the same as the tack and the clew of the main. So these red dots are the tack and clew and the tack and the clew, and they're parallel to each other. That's the proper positioning for the boom versus the pole on when you're trimming the spinnaker. So trips for good trim is if it's too easy to fly, bring the pole back or raise the pole if they're not working at all on the sheets. If it's too hard to trim, they can't keep it full and you're not staying up to speed, ease it forward or lower it a little bit. That'll stabilize it and make it easier to go. So like I said, we do a whole 40-minute presentation on Thursday about this. So you ease the sheet out till you get two 2 panels about of curl and then pull it back. And if it's collapsing too fast, you've got the spinnaker set up flying too high, or or for the conditions you have the spinnaker flying too high, because that'll cause a quick collapse. That photo on the left shows about where the curl should be. It should be in that top third of the spinnaker. Now, helm balance, all of this trim doesn't do anything if your helm isn't balanced. Now, some boats were designed perfect, lots were not. So basically, all that's causing weather helm on your boat is the center of effort versus the center of lateral resistance. The keel's your center of lateral resistance. Your sail plan is the center of effort. So it's just a push and a pull with each other. Now, if they're in line, you're going to have a fairly neutral helm. The boat's going to sail fairly straight. You can balance it. You want a little bit of weather helm for performance, because it's like putting a flap down on a plane when it's flying. You get a little bit of lift from that. And for safety reasons, you also want to have weather helm, so that if you get hit by a big puff, you round up rather than rounding down and getting laid down by the puff. So we kind of talk about weather helm. So the wind direction is coming from the top left of your screen down right. Weather helm is if when you let go of the helm, it rounds up into the wind. Neutral helm is it goes straight, and lee helm is when it falls off. And that's what you want to stay away from at all costs, is lee helm. Now, knowing that it's the center of lateral resistance versus the center of effort, you know that you want to increase the power in the back of the boat to increase weather helm, and decrease power in the back of the boat to reduce weather helm. So, in review, upwind. Trim genoa or jib equal distance from shrouds at the foot as you do up higher on the leach, like up at the spreader height. Trim main for the top batten being parallel to the boom. Trim boom so that the top telltales, or trim main and boom so the top telltale flies, but not all the time, most of the time. And steer the boat so that the telltales evenly flow on both sides of the head sail, and in light air towards the outside one sticking more, and on heavier wind, air on the inside one sticking more. And when weather helm develops, lower the traveler, reduce that pressure in the back of the boat. So in review, downwind, the lighter the wind, the higher the angles you have to sail. We talked about that in depth on Thursday's talk. And when the boat heels, bear away until you have a nice balance. Sailing downwind is really like balancing a broomstick on your hand. When it goes one way, you go with it, and it goes back the other way. Ease the spinnaker until it curls constantly and pull it back in. Just that's a constant movement. That way you know how much pressure it is, and you talk to the helmsman. It helps in performance, and it helps even in cruising, just so that you know how close you are to a collapse. And there's 2 types of collapses, a leeward collapse and a weather collapse. And we talk in depth about both of those on Thursday's talk, because the leeward collapse is the worst situation to be in. Okay, we have a question.
There's a question since you were doing the review downwind. So when you were talking about spinnaker, does the tack clue even alignment apply to the ASIM as well?
Absolutely. So if it was boom was always in plane with the pole, any boat that has a bowsprit, the boom would be on center line, right? And so when you have an asymmetric spinnaker and you're trying to get really low, and you roll the boat to weather, you let the tack line up, and that spinnaker rolls around, that clue is almost even with the tack. The main should be all the way out. When you're reaching, it just keeps coming in. And you use that correlation until you're overpowered, until you actually are rounding up. So that's a very important, very good question. All right. Any more questions? We're just met our timeline here of our 40 minutes that we wanted to hold this for. So feel free to ask questions, and if you want, email in, and we'll try to send out the recording. We had a little bit of technical difficulty, so I don't know how the recording went, but we'll send out a Facebook post and an email with the recording of this webinar as well.
There is another question, Chuck, and I know that got kind of lost with the technical difficulties, but There's a question here. Can you discuss the difference in trim between a pinch mode and a press mode, for example, the head state tension?
Okay, so when you're, it's big boat dependent on that, but when you're in, if you're not up to boat speed, you don't want to have your head stay all the way tight. That's a depowering mode, so that you're trying to accelerate. But with the head stay tighter, you're pointing higher. So when you get into a point mode, you want to have the head stay tighter than you would, but don't overdo it because the boat will slow down substantially. And I like to have only just a couple degrees between my point mode and my general mode, because, like I said, boat speed wins races. So if you keep the bow down and keep it going, you're going to have a higher success rate than trying to go high and slow. I always race my race and let other people race their race, and we keep it back. So.
Okay, so there was a question with, can you share these slides? But I don't know if we didn't have.
Well, we'll see how this goes. I can probably do a PDF of them. It's a pretty large deck, so the file is extremely large. But we'll see what we can do with that. And like I said, we'll try to share this recording, depending on how it actually recorded with the little problems we had.
Someone was saying, please repeat the question, so I don't know if they can't hear me.
They can't hear.
Or the audience questions are all on chat, so there's no other questions. Everybody is muted. So please send questions via the group chat to everyone or all participants.
Yeah, the last question had to do with the forestay tension in point mode versus press mode. And so press mode, you're doing everything for boat speed. So you're trimming the forestay for the conditions 100%. And in point mode, you'll have the forestay tighter than the conditions would normally allow.
Okay, so we have another question. How do you determine the correct height of the tack on ASIM?
On ASIM. How do you determine the correct height of a tack on an asymmetrical spinnaker? So my rule of thumb on this, and Dave Ullman was the one that kind of originally got me on this train, was that when you let the tack line off, if it goes straight up or to weather, you can continue to let it off till you get the sail gets unstable and then bring it down a little. If it goes to leeward, you have to keep it down. You don't want to be letting the tack line off if it's starting to go to the leeward side.
Cool, thank you. And there was one more, if you want to repeat, from last Thursday you had a lecture, and that's online. Where can people find the recording?
We post them out on Facebook, and I send out an email to the group I had. What we'll do is we will have our website at sandiego.ullmansales.com. Sometime this week we'll list all the recorded webinars that we have, and you can just click on them. They're all free and they're all easily accessible.
Okay, you want to ask for one more round if anybody else has
any more questions, and we'll let you guys get onto your cocktails and your quarantine. And hopefully some of you guys will beat us, not beat us, some of you guys will be with us on this Thursday for our Spinnaker talk. We had a limit of 100 people last time, and we were sold out, so we're going to redo that one and let people go, and we're going to record it this time so people can play it back.
Good.
All right, you guys enjoy your time. Thank you very much for coming here. And like I said, every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 p.m., and we'll use both these platforms again. And I hope you guys have a great evening.